Welcome to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, on today's podcast, we speak with Annmarie O'Connor, author, fashion editor, and Parkinson's advocate. Her memoir, Twitch, My Life with Parkinson's, shares her journey from the earliest signs of Parkinson's through diagnosis and adapting to life afterwards. Annmarie is also passionate about practical support for people with Parkinson's, including the resources offered by Parkinsons.ie, and we are thrilled to have her on Real Health. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Fellow Corkonian, huh?
I know. Although I'm a bit of a transplant.
So am I. I think in Cork you'll always be a transplant in Cork.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how long the passport is offered. It might be 10 or 50 or 20 years.
I say you have to be able to recite the chorus to "Where's Me Jumper," and they check you every time you go through the Jack Lynch tunnel. So yeah.
Well, you haven't said like.
Checks.
You haven't said like yet. So
we're getting there. We've got time.
That's not a Cork accent.
No, it's not. I've a very it's a long way from Cork, New York via Galway.
Wow.
So yeah, I was 12 when I moved to Ireland. So I moved from Long Island to Athenry. And my mother is from Inishbofin.
Oh wow.
So yeah, we have ties to the island, and my father had passed when I was 4, so he and my mum had always wanted to move back, so my mum moved us back, and it was a bit of an adjustment.
That's a big
the damp and the super sir heaters.
Oh yeah, remember them? Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, it was definitely a bit of an adjustment, but I love Ireland. Ireland's home, and Cork is my spiritual home. I mean, once I moved there, I've been working for the Irish Examiner since 2008. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that pull every time I'd come down to style a photo shoot, or I'd get that familiar feeling. But even just Cork itself, everyone is so nice. I felt like we had known each other in a former life. So it was around 2018, I was looking for somewhere to live. And Dublin was so expensive. And I loved Dublin, but it was like an inconstant lover. I lived in Dublin, I moved to London, I moved back to Dublin. And I always felt like there was a bit of a love-hate relationship. And then I just thought, sod it, moved to Cork and haven't looked back.
And chat to me about Twitch. It's deeply personal.
Yeah.
It's reflective. What prompted you to want to tell your Parkinson's story in such an honest and very public way?
I wanted to reclaim it. I wanted to own it because I felt like it was quickly becoming something that had happened to me. I knew that, the telling my story started with that article in the Irish Examiner in 2022. And prior to that, I had been quietly stoic about things. And then I had a moment where I just thought, I can continue being quietly stoic, or I can tell people what it's actually like to live with Parkinson's, in particular as a woman, and with early onset Parkinson's, which is what I had. When I got diagnosed, I knew nothing about Parkinson's. I thought it was something that happened to elderly men. So it was like a crash course in dopamine overnight.
Can you tell us to explain for our listeners and our viewers what it actually is? I think that's important.
Parkinson's disease is a chronic and progressive neurological disease. So what it involves is the chemical messenger in the brain called dopamine. We always associate dopamine with the reward center of the brain. So with sex, with pleasure, with eating, drinking, doing all the things.
All the fun
stuff.
All
the fun stuff. But it's actually responsible for very profound things like movement, mood, motivation, and cognition. So by the time somebody is diagnosed with Parkinson's, they've lost 60 to 80% of those nerve cells, the receptors in the brain that are responsible for transmitting dopamine. So how that affects me is my tremor. So I have tremors in my hands, in my feet. I have restless legs. It can also affect people. So I'm a particular type of Parkinson's called early onset, which is quite rare. Okay. So there are 3 types. There's late onset, which is anyone who is diagnosed over the age of 50. There's early onset, which is anyone who's diagnosed under the age of 50. And then there's juvenile, which is incredibly rare, which is under the age of 21. Mm-hmm. But those who are diagnosed as early onset comprise about 10% of the global Parkinson's population, of which there are 10 million people. and about 18,000, although that number may have to be adjusted, in Ireland.
Wow.
So we're a very niche. And when you consider the split, the gender split is about 60-40, then you take that 10% of the 18,000 people living in Ireland, and then you make that 40%. That's the number of women experiencing the disease. And women experience it differently. We tend to experience anxiety, depression, apathy, which are non-motor symptoms of the disease. So there are over 40 symptoms, which are motor and non-motor. So you have to be diagnosed for bradykinesia, which is slowness, and something else like tremor or rigidity. And you can have a host of a combination of other symptoms. So they call it the boutique disease because no two people have the same combination. But my sisters laugh and say, well, out of all the diseases you could have gotten, this one kind of tracks. So, I mean, we have very dark gallows type of humor.
I get that, yeah.
But, that kind of keeps things on the even keel. So it was definitely a baptism of fire for me. So it's important, I felt, in terms of writing the book, that I owned my own story, and that I transformed it from something that was happening to me, victim mode, to something that I could share with others. Mm-hmm. And that's really part of, and also to give Parkinson's a different face. There are so many different faces of Parkinson's. Like I've just described, there are people who are under 21 who have Parkinson's, as well as people who are in their 80s. It's not just the elderly man with the characteristic stoop, shake, and shuffle. And I think that it has now surpassed Alzheimer's as the number one neurodegenerative disease globally. So,
was that mindset shift difficult to do from that victim mode to taking ownership of it?
I never saw myself as being a victim, but I was having a moment. I'd say the first couple of months, we were coming out of COVID. So we were still in that, I was still in that position where I was at home, not going out as much. And I almost leaned into that a bit too much. And I would get invitations naturally with working as a fashion editor. It's very face forward. You have to go, your visibility is high. So I just didn't feel comfortable enough in my own skin, even though I was being medicated, because when you start on medication, they start you on a loading dose, and then they tweak it according to how you move through the world and how you experience symptoms and how you react to the drugs. And, medication for me took about 13 months until we hit the sweet spot. Yeah, exactly. So it can take a while. I knew, I just thought, Annmarie, you're avoiding things. You're avoiding things. And when my boss at the Examiner suggested, she said, would you be interested? There's no pressure. I thought, well, here's my opportunity. And I tend to go bold or go home. I'm not really a middle of the road type of person. And I just thought, this is my chance to do it in the privacy of my own home before, and then just blow the lid on it. And then there's no coming back. You nearly have to do that, like take off the floaties and jump in.
Feet first.
And the fact is, I think a lot of it was in my own head, because most people reacted well. Some people get a bit uncomfortable initially, but then they adjust to it. It's fine.
Talk to me about the early stages of diagnosis. What were the early signs, early symptoms?
Well, the first symptom was, it was during COVID, and there was a lift in lockdown restrictions, and I took the opportunity to work, and I worked on about 2 photo shoots because I was broke and I needed money because my 60% of my income was decimated just by COVID overnight. Yeah. So I was like, woohoo, let's do some work. So I think my muscles were just getting used to the fact that I was carrying heavy bags again. And I woke up one morning and I had like a frozen shoulder, and I just assumed it was because of that, because there's a lot of pulling and dragging with stylist work. And then a few weeks later, It was so bad. I was debating whether wanted to take a shower and I couldn't unclasp my bra.
Oh.
And I was like, do I wash with it on or do I cut it off? And because I was in that much pain, I couldn't unclasp my bra. There was that much rigidity in my shoulder. And then shortly thereafter, I got small involuntary movements in my fingers. It was like a flutter, it almost sounded poetic, like a butterfly's wings. And then that became a steady shake with a wave-like rhythm that went from my fingers and it extended up to my arm.
Wow.
So that was over a period of months, because this happened November 2020. I called my sister and I said, what do you think it is? She's like, it's probably like a trapped nerve. Don't be worrying about it. I was like, yeah. It's always the most logical reason. You think, fine. So it was March before we could see our GPs. So my GP had arranged for me to get 3 MRIs. So one on my shoulder, one on my neck and spine, and a brain scan. So over a period of 9 months, I think it was, because that was March until December. That's about 9 months. Because of the pressure that was put on the healthcare system, took ages to get MRIs and ages to get the results back. So each one, like the shoulder MRI came back, and it's like that knocked the trapped nerve on the head, because there was nothing wrong with my shoulder. The back came back, the neck and spine, that was fine. And by the time my brain scan had come back, which was clear, and I'll explain why in a moment, my hand had started to cup inwards.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
My handwriting became small and really cramped. I couldn't apply mascara, which is a hate crime in my world. And I was dragging my leg. There were lots of, and these symptoms independently had happened over a course of 9 months. But the hand cupping and the small handwriting, and just the fact that everything was just moving, I was just constantly in a state of motion. My GP was like, the math isn't mathing. We're sending you to the acute medical unit in Cork University Hospital tomorrow morning, and we're getting an answer. So that was the 16th of December was my diagnosis day. I remember it so clearly. I arrived at 9 a.m. with a book, and she was like, get a sandwich, because you're going to be there till 4 o'clock. I saw a nurse, I saw a doctor, I saw a few neurologists, and then I saw the man who would be my consultant neurologist. And it was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We talked about my, medical history, this, that, and the third. He did a few tests, and then he was like, you've got early onset Parkinson's disease. Wow. And so it's strange, because I thought, at least I have an answer. But then I had all these questions. But I was in shock.
When you're on your own?
I was on my own.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We always say bring someone, because you shut down with people here. And we've interviewed people with all different types of diagnosis. They say that. They shut down when they hear the initial.
It was like somebody else, I keep saying, it was like an envoy or a PA. I turned into a version of me. And I was like, taking notes, noting everything he said. About a fraction of it got into my head. Yep. And he said, you need to come back to me next week with a second set of ears to take this all in, because none of this will have gotten into your head. In fact, when we meet again, I would, bargain to say that, the same thing will happen. So I went with my best friend, and she's great because she's really practical. So the two of us were swapping notes after we had met with my consultant, and he had said to me, you have a choice to be on medication or not to be on medication. The reason why it's a choice is because medication comes with side effects. Mm-hmm. But the benefit of medication for somebody who's early onset is that you get to stave off you get to slow down the progression of the disease. It's incurable, so medication only helps with the symptoms. It won't help with the actual, it can't do anything for the disease itself. So I chose to go on medication because I wanted to ring fence those years that were more productive for me. But just if I can circle back to the reason why my brain scan was clear, I had asked him that. I said, why was my brain scan clear if I had Parkinson's? And he said, Parkinson's lives a couple of millimeters below what is picked up in an MRI. What we need to give you is something called a DAT scan. So Parkinson's is a clinical diagnosis, but the DAT scan rules out anything, any kind of pretenders to the Parkinson's throne, anything that could come up like essential tremor, like that Parkinson's could be mistaken for. So I had my DAT scan. I was diagnosed in December 2021. I had my DAT scan in May 2022. And it's funny, Karl, because I kept asking myself during those months, maybe it's been published worldwide, has it wrong? And the DAT scan came back in May, and it was, basically said you've got it, Yeah, and it was like kind of bittersweet because I always thought that there was some other. Even before my diagnosis, people ask me, "Did you not think it was Parkinson's?" I said, "Why would I?
Yeah, of course.
I never thought women got Parkinson's. I knew nothing about Parkinson's. I kept thinking trapped nerve, that it was something that was easily explained and could be fixed."
And is there a family history link, or is that part of the Parkinson's?
No, you want to hear the funny thing is that our family history has, my father died of something called HHT. It's not a funny story. I don't know why I use the word funny, but my sisters both have HHT. So HHT is a hereditary vascular disease.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's very rare. And when my father died, he had a brain hemorrhage, which meant that he had a malformed arteriole in the brain, and the pressure from the blood made it burst like a faulty pipe. So my two sisters have it. My twin sisters and I don't have it. There are 5 of us in the family. My twin sisters, though, are racked with chronic like asthma and, this, that, and the third. They're always in and out to the doctors, right? I am the only one, Karl, who literally has clean bill of health. My sisters would laugh at me and say, "You so-and-so, bleep, bleep.
Say whatever you want.
Yeah. You go to the doctors for the crack. You go in to get your bloods done just to feel needed, because it always comes out clear." And I said to my sister, Patricia, I'm going to be the one who gets knocked over by the 2:20 bus from Carrigaline. I'll have one of these deaths that or I fall over in my apartment and I'm not found for 3 days. And of course, then I get knocked with this completely, this is something you'd never ever think of, like early onset Parkinson's in a woman. But there it is. And the fact of the matter is, there's so many people since my medical coming out story.
Yep.
And I started a TikTok that helps promote, positive, being positive with Parkinson's. It uses humor. I always use humor as an agent of change because I think it's a way to help us deal with things, but without being too Pollyanna about things, So it's informative, but it's, at times a bit of a laugh too. There are so many young people with Parkinson's. When I was on the Brendan O'Connor show, the Tommy Tiernan show, shortly after the article with the Irish Examiner, the amount of young people who got in contact with me was unbelievable. So when I was told I have a rare form of Parkinson's, I thought, well, I've just found a huge cohort that I don't know. Do the numbers actually, that's why I said there are 18,000 people with Parkinson's in Ireland, but does that accurately reflect the number of young people and the number of young people who are getting Parkinson's? It said that it could be genetic or it could be environmental or a mix of both. But it's strange that just how many, and this is just from my own perception. I'm just one potato on the internet, with a TikTok account. I can't verify that there's a huge amount, or maybe the amount is greater than the numbers purport to be. But, going to Parkinson's Ireland, which is a huge support network for me, and going to any of their meetings, you meet a lot. There's so many young people, just increasingly so. It's just something that I notice from my own perception.
And from Twitch, what did you want the readers to get from it when you're writing it? Did you have kind of core beliefs or values you wanted people to get from it?
It's funny because obviously the essence is my chronology, my journey with Parkinson's, but really at its core, there's a quote in the book, and it says, when something falls apart, whether it's your health, your career, or a relationship, all rubble looks the same. It's our humanity that connects us and our stories that help us heal. So I just think that there's a universality, and that's what happened to me. The rug went clean from underneath me, and it was just a world of uncertainty. It's like, how do you navigate that without becoming your story, you know, without being attached to the drama? Because that's not I didn't want to be defined by Parkinson's. It's only part of who I am. You know, I've got brown eyes, I'm 6 foot tall, I've got 4 sisters, and I've got Parkinson's. You know, it's just part of the story. It's not the center. It's not the center. And I didn't want to be a person who curtailed my life because of it, who stopped reaching for opportunities, and who stopped living out loud. And I think the only way that I could kind of overcome that, or the way that I knew how, was through writing. And it was very healing as well, you know, because the grief process with Parkinson's isn't something that we talk about. The grief process, because you go into survival mode when you're diagnosed, and then you go through the mundane, everyday aspects of life that need to be managed. Your medication needs to be taken on time all the time. I take medication 5 times a day.
Is it really that much? Okay.
Yeah. So I take medication 5 times a day. I have to be super hydrated, really important. And I'm somebody who could live on coffee quite happily, and anything sweet. And that's like your diet is super important. Your sleep, because, and like, you know, cutting back on alcohol. In the book, I talk about, you know, in the early days, I was like, sure, take a few tablets and go about my life. And then I went out with friends one night, and I paid for it handsomely the next day, because, you know, if it interferes with your sleep and you've got restless legs and it makes your restless legs worse, you're not getting it. And then your hangover is worse. You quickly learn, okay, I can't behave the way I used to be, the way I used to. Not that I was out swinging from the chandeliers. Mm-hmm. I'm the most boring person in the room, trust me. But you quickly realize that your life has changed unalterably. And that if you want to live well with Parkinson's, which is this new uninvited house guest, you have to create new house rules. And it's not always fun, but I'm sure that anyone who's run a marathon and gets up at 5 a.m. to go for a run doesn't think it's a whole lot of crack either, you know, but the results that you get from it are definitely worth it, because the whole idea is to slow down the progression of the disease. Exercise is proven, and it's medication free. And, you know, if I don't get my 10,000, if I'm not out during the day, even for a short walk, I feel it. Yeah, I definitely, I'm one for fresh air, getting outside, just getting a good walk. And in Cork, as we know, everything's uphill. So you've got resistance training.
There's hills everywhere,
well.
isn't it?
The hills are alive.
And we've a new green walkway by Parky Queeve as well.
Yes,
that's fabulous.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
From coming into us today, what would you like people to get from our chat? We always ask our guests. I think it's nice to kind of summarize the conversation towards the end, to say, well, look, you know, what would you like our listeners to take from today's conversation?
I'd like them to take that. Such a good question.
The hard question.
The hard question.
Yeah.
It's not, when you get a diagnosis, when something happens that completely throws you off course, it's not the end. It's the beginning. It's the beginning maybe of a chapter you didn't want to write, but this is the life that you have. So how are you going to live it?
And everyone has, everyone has some version of.
Everyone has some version of the twitch.
Yeah.
So it's the twitch. The way I describe the twitch, for me, when my hand started twitching, it was during COVID when it was quiet and I was able to listen to my body. I don't think I would have heard it or I would have paid it as much attention to it had COVID not been happening and had I been overscheduled. I probably would have thought I had too much caffeine and kept moving. You know what I mean? And I probably would have thought it was something like a trapped nerve, and I would have kept booking myself for photo shoots and going, I'll get to a doctor another time. I'll get to a doctor another time. And the twitch is that quiet cataclysmic moment before the wrecking ball hits. And if your body is telling you something, listen, because the body doesn't lie.
And we live in an age of distraction where we are distracted by life, by family, by busyness, by we put everything on the long finger, we put everything off.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly important message, which is to listen to the body. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All the way from Cork. I love when guests travel up to us. It's fabulous. Your book Twitch is out online. It's in bookstores nationwide. You can hold it up to the camera. Yeah, straight to the camera too. There we go. It is in bookstores nationwide and available online as well. And Annmarie, thank you so much for coming in today. We really appreciate it. Folks, that is it for another episode of Real Health with me, Karl Henry. As ever, you know where we are, at Karl Henry PT on Instagram, realhealth@independent.ie, and on the Irish Independent website. And we'll see you next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.